Hey everybody, Coach Jack here from Common Sense Keto. Today I want to get into what Common Sense Keto is actually all about, and that's primarily that calorie restriction is not the way to lose weight. It's not the way to keep weight off. And if we've learned anything from some of the famous people that have had weight issues on TV and on the internet, it doesn't really work. And let's look at one famous person, for example. Let's call her Mrs. O. I think everybody probably knows who she is. She's had weight struggles for her entire life, and it's been very public. And if you look at her current state compared to where she's been, you can tell that she's been doing it the standard way. She's been cutting calories. She's actually just bought into Weight Watchers, which is probably an amazing investment for her because they have about a 2% success rate, so it keeps you coming back for more and more and more. I think everybody's might have seen her latest commercial for Weight Watchers. I love bread. Well, clearly I love bread is probably not working out the best for you. Now, on top of that, if we look at the holy grail of weight loss solutions, bariatric surgery, gastric bypass. I actually considered doing that when I was extremely overweight. I'm so glad I didn't. It has a 5% success rate. So even cutting part of your stomach out so you cannot physically eat has a 5% success rate. Now, why do we think that is? It's because cutting calories changes the way your body works. It slows down your metabolism, and yes, you lose weight for a while, but it's not a permanent solution. It's just going to be temporary, and this happens to everybody. As soon as you get down to a certain weight, the body becomes adapted to that low level of energy coming in, and to try to keep you from dying, from eating yourself to death, it slows down your metabolism to keep you alive longer. Okay. Along with today's video, I always like to throw in some science, so we're going to look at a couple of studies. First one is by Dr. Stephen Phinney, who some will refer to as the grandfather of the keto diet. He pretty much coined the term nutritional ketosis, and he's done many studies, and he's one of the few who've done studies on keto over the years. This first one we're going to look at, he took a group of overweight women. They were all on very low calorie diets. I think they put them on an 800 calorie a day diet, and he wanted to see the effect of exercise on the changes in metabolic rate. So he put half of them on no exercise, and he put the other half on exercise increasing in duration up to maximum of 2 hours. And there were some pretty significant differences. Now, both groups in the first week had about a 10% reduction in their metabolic rate. And this is pretty consistent among any calorie restricted diet. Within the first week you see a 10% reduction, some a little more, in the amount of energy they can burn. Now, the group that was on no exercise, they pretty much stayed for the rest of the duration of the study at a 10% reduction. But something significant happened with the group that was doing 2 hours a day of exercise. Their metabolic rate decreased by an additional 17%. So 27% reduction in metabolic rate over the term of the study by adding exercise. And this is the number one thing that all fitness experts will have you do, is they'll have you cut your calories ridiculously low, and they'll have you start exercising like crazy. So obviously it should work. You're eating less and you're burning a whole bunch of calories, so you must be losing more weight. Interestingly enough, the people that were doing the exercise didn't lose any more weight than the people that weren't exercising. Because they were burning so much more energy, their body just slowed down their metabolism even more to keep them from using all their lean mass, from going into a starvation state. It's all about survival, and if you're burning massive amounts of energy and not taking it in, your body's not going to let itself die. It's not going to let itself eat itself into oblivion. It's going to stop that from happening, and it does it in a couple of ways. So one of the other findings confirmed that, and it showed a dramatic drop in thyroid hormone levels in the group that did exercise compared to the non-exercising group. They both had reductions in thyroid hormone, but the group that had exercise built in had a much more dramatic drop in their free T3, which is the active thyroid hormone. There's also been other studies showing that if you want to drop your T3 even further and have just as bad as a result as the exercise group, that fasting, not eating at all, actually has a dramatic effect on dropping not only thyroid function but metabolism to the tune of about 25%. Stephen Phinney as well is not a fan of fasting, and he does not advise it. I don't think all of his numbers are exactly right. I don't think you're going to lose massive amounts of lean mass like he does while fasting, but it definitely does drop your thyroid function, and I will speak to that in a later video. I've done some blogs on that as well. I'm going to put the links to all the studies I talk about in the notes down below, so you can subscribe, check out the actual studies if you wish. Next thing I want to talk about is Ancel Keys. Some of you might recognize the name. He's the person behind the whole cholesterol's bad for you, saturated fat's going to kill you, it gives you a heart attack, and the famous 7-country study. He actually did a study that I think is pretty amazing, and it's pretty telling. It's called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. This was done in 1944. What he did in this experiment was he took a group of healthy men, he tested them to make sure they were mentally and physically capable of the rigors of doing this, and he mimicked a diet that would have represented what people would have available for food in the post-war era. So in Europe, post-war, food shortages were going to be very relevant, and he wanted to see what the effects of this would be. So he put them all on a very strict calorie regimen, which, just to put in perspective, these men were 152 pounds on average, pretty physically fit, and he put them all on first he put them on a period of a diet maintenance at roughly, it was an average of 3,200 calories. For a 152 pound man, they were eating 3,200 calories, and some of them lost weight eating 3,200 calories. That's very telling. 1944, people could eat 3,000 calories at 150 pounds and lose weight or maintain their weight. Now, the diet that he put them on was 1,500 calories. 1,500 calories. This should sound familiar to a lot of people, because every day I talk to people that are asking why they can't eat 1,200 and 1,500 calories a day. Because it's starvation. The study was called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, and they had these men eating 1,500 calories a day. So what happened to these men? They literally became insane. They lost their minds. All they could focus on was food, nonstop. That's all they could think about. They'd hoard and collect recipes for food. They'd talk about food all day. They were allowed to drink as much coffee as they wanted, and they were allowed to chew as much gum as they wanted. Some of the men would drink as much as 40 cups of coffee a day to try to curb their hunger. By the end of the experiment, they had to implement a buddy system to make sure that the men didn't cheat, because they were so obsessed with food. They would try to find a way to sneak food in. So they put them on a buddy system where somebody had to watch them at all times to make sure they weren't eating off plan. Several of the men had to be institutionalized because they were threatening to kill Dr. Keys if they couldn't get food. So they were taken out of the program and put into the mental ward of the hospital until they were fine. This took several months for some of the people to recover from this. There was one man that actually went into such a state that he chopped his own fingers off with an axe. This is true. This is all true, and I'll put the link to the study down below so you can go check it out for yourself. This is on 1,500 calories, and this is what I have men speaking to me that are 300 pounds and wanting to eat 1,500 calories a day. These men were 150 pounds and they were going insane eating 1,500 calories a day. Imagine what this is going to do to somebody that's 300 pounds. whose metabolic need is probably about 4,000 calories a day, and they want to eat 1,500 calories, and they're wondering what's wrong with that. It's starvation. So they took many measurements of the men over time. They measured their metabolic rate, which dropped by as much as 50% in most of the men. Their blood volume reduced. They found they were no longer bleeding when they cut themselves shaving, and those cuts would take longer to heal. One very interesting thing they noticed is that their eyeballs became extremely white. No veins in their eyeballs anymore. It became glassy, looking like doll eyes. And this is something I've heard from an actual friend of mine who went vegan. She said, but my eyeballs are so white, it's such a sign of health. No, it's not a sign of health. It's a sign that your blood volume is reduced and you're not getting adequate blood flow to your eye. It's actually very dangerous. And this was one of the things the men seen. Their body temperature dropped as well. They lost a huge amount of weight, but they stopped losing weight. I'm not sure how far into it. I can't remember how far into this test it was, but they stopped losing weight and some of them started gaining weight again. And that was another reason they had to implement the buddy system, because Ancel Keys accused them of cheating. They were gaining weight during the period of the study. So this shows their metabolic rate dropped enough that they were actually using less energy than 1,500 calories and they were gaining weight back. Another side effect that many of you will find pertinent is they started losing hair in clumps. They could pull out clumps of hair from their head. When they were taking a shower, it was filling the drains. This is something that people that come to me with massive calorie deficits, like 12 or 1,500 calories, also experience. Why am I losing my hair? One of my first posts I ever wrote was about why am I losing more hair than weight. I'll put the link to that one in the bottom as well. So what happened when they finished the experiment? All the men were extremely excited, obviously, to get off of this 1,500 calorie a day diet. So they started slowly feeding them again, not to overwhelm their system with too much energy to begin with. But they started increasing the calories. And for most of the men, it took a full 3 to 4 months before they were back to their normal selves. They stopped the manic type of behavior they were having. And they seemed to never be satiated. There were some men reported eating as much as 11,500 calories and still not being satiated. Another problem they had during the refeeding was, yes, they gained their weight back, but because they lost such a significant amount of muscle mass during the period, they gained only fat back. So they were actually fatter than they were when they started. Their muscle mass was less and their fat mass was more. Therefore, they never got back their full metabolic rate, because muscle is what burns the most energy in the body. So gaining back fat and not gaining back muscle is not productive. It's not going to allow you to get back to that full metabolic rate that you were at before. So you'll never be quite the same as you were before if you've lost a bunch of weight quickly and gained it back quickly as well. That's probably the biggest problem with this restriction dieting, is you don't only lose fat, you lose muscle mass, and therefore you lose your ability to maintain a stable weight. The next thing I want to talk about is someone named Alfred Pennington, who in 1953 wrote a paper talking about how calorie restriction only causes a drop in metabolic rate and it was not necessary for weight loss. He described a method whereby just reducing carbohydrate and not limiting calories whatsoever, people could lose as much or more weight as they did restricting calories, but they would maintain their metabolic rate. Now that sounds pretty familiar to what I've been talking about for the last couple of years, because it's exactly that. There's no need to cut calories if you want to lose weight and maintain your metabolism. It's actually more beneficial to not restrict calories, because you can maintain that ability to use energy. So you can see the quote down below from Alfred Pennington where he describes the process where only cutting carbohydrates and not restricting calories is key to losing weight and maintaining metabolism. And maintaining metabolism is so very important if you want to keep that weight off. So again, it's not a problem about losing weight. You can lose weight by cutting calories. It's keeping it off. That's the goal. That's what we all want to do. I'm sure many of us have lost the same 100 pounds 5 times over. Every single time you do that, you damage your metabolism a little bit more. The key is to get it off and keep it off, not to get it off and then gain it back again. So not cutting calories, just eating the right foods, maintaining your metabolic rate is the key to all of this. And Alfred Pennington knew this in 1953, yet today we're still trying to figure this out. So I know what everybody's going to say about Alfred Pennington. He's just one crazy guy with some crazy theory, just wrote a paper, you know, what's the matter what he says? That's what everybody's going to say. Well, there was actually a university in Montreal that tested out his theory. They took a group of 48 people and tested this out on them. No restriction of calories, just restricted carbs. So all of these people, they had weight problems and all of them had failed on caloric restriction diets before. So this was a perfect test to see if Pennington's theory was going to work. So 8 of them dropped out right away because they were upset they couldn't have sweets. There was 12 more of them that dropped out because they didn't feel they were losing weight fast enough. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with that feeling. Everybody wants to drop 25 pounds right now, but in reality, that's not the way it's going to happen, and that's probably not the best way for it to happen. The faster you lose it, typically, the faster you gain it back, and this is pretty confirmable by almost anyone that's ever lost weight fast. They typically gain it back just as fast. So the 28 that remained lost weight very consistently at a very good rate they were all happy with, and they found it easy to do. They didn't have to count their calories. They didn't have to restrict anything. They also enjoyed the lack of hunger that they felt with this. Being on low-calorie diets before, they were very familiar with the feelings of hunger and, you know, the nagging, annoying feeling of being hungry all the time. So they were very happy with that result. So the very last thing I want to talk about is The Biggest Loser. Everyone has seen the show The Biggest Loser. People yelling at you, running on a treadmill for 6 hours a day, working out like crazy, eating super low calories. Everyone's seen this. They've seen the dramatic weight loss. So clearly, cutting calories works for weight loss. Now, here's the problem. The NIH followed the contestants for 6 years after the show to see what would happen to them. Now, all these people maintain this crazy exercise routine and their crazy low-calorie diet, yet the majority of them all gained significant weight back. An even more crazy thing is they measured their metabolic rate 6 years after the show was over, and they still had a reduction in their metabolic rate of 700 calories on average. That's significant. That is a huge difference. Now, if you think about the average resting metabolic rate of a woman being 1,400 calories and 1,800 for a man, losing 700 calories off of that is huge. It's a 38% reduction in metabolic rate. Now, I don't know about you, but how easy is that going to be to maintain? So a woman, for example, you normally sitting still, you burn 1,400 calories a day. Now, after 6 years of exercising like crazy and eating nothing, you can only burn 700 calories. How are you going to be able to do that? All of these contestants were working out for 6 years, at least 3 hours a day just to maintain weight, but they weren't maintaining, they were gaining slowly. So all of these people, despite working out like crazy, usually 3 to 4 hours a day, and eating 12 to 1,500 calorie a day diets, still gained weight back because their metabolic rate dropped. And that's all eat less and move more does to you. It sets you up for failure in the long run. Yes, you might lose weight quick. You might be just like The Biggest Loser and lose 100 pounds, 150 pounds over the course of a season. But is it worth it? These people have to work their butts off 3 to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, and starve themselves to still not maintain weight. They still gain weight. Is that worth it? The only time I wasn't able to keep my weight down is when I cut calories. I went off the rails for a couple of years and started getting into the eating less and moving more. I was working out 6 to 7 days a week, eating 1,500 calories a day because that's what everybody was shouting at me to do. And I was doing it with low carb. I never went off low carb. I did it with low carb the whole time. Yet I was gaining weight doing this. It's the only time I had trouble with my weight was when I was cutting calories. Now, I spend a good part of the year, so far this year I've done 44 days at 5,000 calories, and I lose weight. I'm the leanest I've ever been in my life. So what sounds better? Starving, exercising like a maniac to lose a couple of pounds or even a fair amount of weight really quickly and then gaining it back, or just eating enough to maintain your thyroid function, maintain your metabolism, and be able to lose weight slowly, consistently, and keep it off for the rest of your life. To me, it sounds pretty basic, which one I would prefer, which one I've used successfully, and I hope that you guys want to do the same thing as well. Okay, so that's it for today. If you want to get some more information about Common Sense Keto or what we do, you can check out the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/commonsenseketogenics or the blog at www.commonsenseketogenics.com. I'll put both those links in the notes below. And as always, if you have any requests for topics you'd like me to discuss or anything you would like to focus on specifically that we talked about in this video, leave a comment below and I'll do my best to address it. As always, thanks for watching.